your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Hello, I'm Naveen Day. Thanks for joining us for a look at what made headlines this week. Federal Labour Minister Steven MacKinnon says he is, quote, calling a timeout in the Canada Post strike and asking the Canada Industrial Relations Board to send about 55,000 employees back to work. MacKinnon says the Crown Corporation and the Canadian Union of Postal Workers are at an impasse after a nearly month-long work stoppage, and negotiations are actually going in the wrong direction. He says if the board agrees the two sides are at an impasse, it has been asked to order union members to return to work until May. The federal government is establishing an inquiry to determine why the two sides cannot come to an agreement. The Bank of Canada cut its key lending rate by 0.5% this week to 3.25%. Officials say inflation is back to the 2% target and lower interest rates are helping Canadians to spend a little more. The bank's governor, Tiff Macklin, says, however, that economic growth has been slower than anticipated, and the outlook now appears softer than projected back in October.
With inflation back to target, we've cut the policy rate by 50 basis points at each of the last two decisions because monetary policy no longer needs to be clearly in restrictive territory. We want to see growth pick up to absorb the unused capacity in the economy and keep inflation close to 2%. The Governing Council has reduced the policy rate substantially since June, and those cuts will be working their way through the economy. Going forward, we will be evaluating the need for further reductions in the policy rate, one decision at a time.
The Bank of Canada's next interest rate decision is slated for January 29th, when it will also publish its updated outlook for the economy and inflation. An NDP motion to permanently pause the GST was defeated in Parliament. Leader Jagmeet Singh says the Liberal government's two-month GST pause, which began this weekend, should be completely axed to help cover monthly expenses such as phone and internet bills. He also says the other federal parties voted against expanding the government's proposed $250 rebate checks to include more than those who are currently working.
In addition, they also voted against a senior getting that check. They voted against people living with disabilities getting that check. They voted against a single mom taking care of her kids that had to make sacrifices, not getting a check. That's what they voted for. They voted for them not getting a check. I think it's clear that Canadians need someone who's going to fight for them, who's going to fight for tax cuts for the working class, not for billionaires. That's why I'm running for Prime Minister.
Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre took issue with Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland during question period. Poilievre says Freeland promised Canada's deficit would not exceed $40 billion, but when the fall economic statement is released on Monday, it may be a lot higher than that.
According to the Globe and Mail, the Prime Minister's office has given internal direction for an aggressive and possibly costly policy agenda that threatens to blow past spending targets she has already publicly stated for the government. She promised the deficit would be capped at $40 billion, acknowledging that if it went over, it would cause even more inflation. That means hungry Canadians lined up at food banks. So once again, will the government meet the minister's promise to keep the deficit under $40 billion?
The leader of the opposition is also perplexed because he doesn't let his own MPs speak out on anything that he doesn't stamp and approve. He has people follow them around with tape recorders so that they don't speak to media about anything that he doesn't pre-approve. That's not being Canadians' voices in this place, Mr. Speaker.
Canada's premiers met with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau this week to discuss a plan to deal with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's threats of a 25% tariff on Canadian goods. Liberal MPs spoke out about the meeting as they headed to caucus on Wednesday.
Well, we all have to work together. This is a really important moment for Canada when it comes to ensuring that we have a robust trading relationship with the United States. For that to happen, federal government and provinces and territories all have to work together. We have to have a strategy that serves Canadians. There's no room for freelancing here, and that's why I think the meeting that's happening today is extremely important.
We have to act in the interests of Canadians, and whether it looks like we're caving to his demands is completely irrelevant. If his demands are aligned with the best interests of Canada, the perception of the relationship doesn't matter.
And Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says premiers have pitched products that could be included in counter tariffs against the United States.
The Prime Minister was clear in Halifax on Monday that Canada, of course, would respond to unjustified tariffs. That is what we did in 2018, and our response worked. Of course, in our discussion today with the premiers of the provinces and territories, we discussed the Canada-US relationship, we discussed the border, we also discussed the economic relationship, and a number of premiers offered strong support for a robust Canadian response. That included some of the premiers proactively naming critical minerals and metals that their provinces produce and which are exported to the United States.
Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc also says more information on Canada's plan to beef up the border will be revealed soon. Meanwhile, Premier Danielle Smith announced new measures aimed at improving security along Alberta's border with the United States. Smith says action is being taken by the province and it will crack down on illegal immigrants trafficking drugs across the border.
We're investing $29 million to create a new unit, the Interdiction Patrol Team, or IPT, under the command of the Alberta Sheriffs. This unit will be supported by over 50 specially trained sheriffs. 4 drug patrol dogs, critical to ensure reasonable suspicion to search vehicles. 10 cold weather surveillance drones that can operate in high winds with dedicated pilots. And 4 narcotics analyzers to test for illicit drugs. The IPT will be made up of 7 teams of sheriffs. We will also create a 2-kilometer deep border zone, which is a red zone deemed critical infrastructure to enable the sheriffs to arrest individuals found attempting to cross the border illegally or attempting to traffic illegal drugs or weapons without needing a warrant.
And speaking of Alberta, former Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley is resigning as an MLA. Notley says she is stepping down from her position in the Edmonton-Strathcona riding on December 30th. The former Alberta Premier made the announcement on social media, adding the decision comes with mixed feelings. The vacant seat at the Alberta Legislature potentially opens the door for current Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi, who told BCN in the past he would seek a seat in either Edmonton or Calgary. Nenshi, who currently does not have a seat, splits his time between the two cities. There is going to be a change to Alberta's electricity market. Officials say it will restore the balance between affordability, reliability, and sustainability. To discuss this in more detail is Alberta's Minister of Affordability and Utilities, Nathan Newdorf, who joined BCN's Hal Roberts from Edmonton.
So Nathan, how will these changes allow Albertans to really save money? And what kind of savings are we looking at here?
Well, we're looking at balance for the future and protecting the ratepayer. Right now, the costs of development are all paid for by the ratepayer, and there's no balance and direction of what power we need where, what transmission we need where. This sets the rules to allow for that to be brought back into control, into balance, to protect the future costs for ratepayers, no matter where you live or what you do for work.
So what has been the reason for such high electricity bills? Does it have something to do with Albertans being on the hook for the cost of new transmission lines being built?
That's exactly right, Hal. And the very rapid phase out of coal that didn't account for the difference of generation capabilities from coal to natural gas to renewables. So this takes in, again, not just the generation cost, that was a significant consideration, but also the transmission cost, because we had a rule that said you couldn't have congestion on a line. So every time that a new generator built, which we had a proliferation of under renewables, you had to change that transmission cost. And that added billions of dollars to the ratepayers' bill that they had no control over because that rule was in place. This sets a much more responsible path and a balanced path forward to make sure that we're not only providing the lowest achievable generation cost to ratepayers, but also the lowest achievable transmission cost to ratepayers.
Now, has the influx of around 40,000 people moving to our province over the past year put a strain on our electricity grid? I mean, are we able to accommodate that many more people?
We are actually. We've got a very stable grid. We have a very strong grid. These rules will help reinforce that. And it allows the development of our grid and a cost causation model to say, where are those people moving? Obviously, we need to do development there. And if they're receiving the benefit of having electricity to their home or business, they should pay an appropriate share of that cost. But if generation or transmission is being built where we don't need it, then those who cause that cost, they should bear that cost on there. And this is a responsible way to balance the growth of population, balance the growth of industry with the generation growth and development growth of our grid. And that's why we think we can accommodate for it. We have enough dispatchable to get us through this winter, even through our population growth. We're in a very stable place right now where we can continue to see development and growth, but where we need it most.
Alberta Affordability and Utilities Minister Nathan Neudorf, thanks so much for joining us today from Edmonton.
You may know him as Mr. Wonderful, but he may now be known as Mr. Wonder Valley. Kevin O'Leary, host of Shark Tank and Dragon's Den, plans to open a $70 billion AI research center called Wonder Valley in partnership with the Municipal District of Greenwood in northwestern Alberta. O'Leary claims it would be the largest real estate project ever proposed in Canada and the world's largest AI data center. The planned site would cover 7,000 acres, 40 kilometers south of the city of Grand Prairie. O'Leary said in a statement, he says it's the perfect site crediting the cold weather climate, highly skilled labor force, Alberta's pro-business policies, and attractive tax regime. O'Leary says he expects the future site to offer 7.5 gigawatts of low-cost power to hyperscalers over the next 5 to 10 years. Wonder Valley is expected to be developed in multiple phases and bring in an influx of job opportunities to Alberta. The Alberta government says it is eliminating the photo radar cash cow as of April the 1st. Officials say photo radar will be taken down in areas that specifically generate revenue and do not offer traffic safety benefits. But the announcement December 1st by Alberta Transport Minister Devin Dreeshen is not sitting well with everyone, including some police chiefs. Here to discuss it further with Hal Roberts is our legislative correspondent, Tyler Dawson.
Well, the way the system is set up is that there's going to be the amount of money that an insurance company can increase your premiums by annually right now is capped. And so that cap is going to get a little bit bigger, I think to about 7%. So it means that there will be a jump next year, a bigger jump than there would have been had these rules not changed. And there will be a jump the year after, again, a bigger jump if these rules had not changed. In theory, the idea goes that will sort of give the insurance industry a little bit of time to make some more money, build up, reserves maybe, I don't know. And that's when sort of the no-fault insurance plan would come in, which would limit insurance company payouts because barring some exceptional circumstances, you wouldn't be able to take the at-fault driver to court, which presumably lowers the payouts that insurance companies are going to have to pay. So there may be some relief in a couple of years, but it doesn't seem like there's going to be a reduction in premiums for the next couple of years. The reason that sort of matters is because the Alberta government did do a big survey consultation of Albertans, asking them what they thought, what they wanted to see when it came to the insurance industry, when it came to insurance costs. And about, I think 54%, so a small majority, but certainly majority, said their number one priority was bringing down costs. If that's not going to happen over the next couple of years, you might have some hurt feelings going into an election year. Maybe we'll see a massive reduction in insurance costs going into that year. But of course, not everyone's insurance renews on January 1st, right? You know, my insurance renews, I think, in July. So the election will be held before my insurance drops down under that scheme. So a little bit of political risk there, I think, for the UCP. Even if rates come down, it won't be for a couple of years. People might have forgotten. The rates might not come down to what they wanted them to. It's certainly a little bit of a risky plan of attack on the insurance front, I would say.
And you know, it's going to make it much more challenging for drivers under the age of 25, especially if it's going up, and away over the next couple of years. It's going to make it very tough on them. Tyler, as of April Fool's Day, photo radar in the province will mostly be shut down. We'll mainly see it, I believe, in the school zones, playground zones, and construction zones moving forward. Now, government officials say it'll end on provincial highways. Now, you and I have driven up and down Highway 2 many times over the years. I don't think I ever remember a time of seeing photo radar set up along that stretch of highway.
No, I don't either. You know, I called the transportation ministry and said, I've never seen a photo radar truck on Highway 2. What's going on here? And they said that there have actually been tickets issued for photo radar on provincial highways. So I suppose, you know, secondary highways and perhaps some sections of highways that are going through cities and things like that. I'm not entirely certain, but yeah, that caught my eye too. I thought, well, you're eliminating something that doesn't exist, but I guess it does. So maybe we've just missed it in all of the miles we've driven. But they've basically been arguing for a long time that photo radar is a cash cow, that it needs to be eliminated, that it's not reducing, you know, it's not improving traffic safety. It's just a way to, you know, make more money. And there's some truth to that. There's a lot of money that's made across the province from photo radar. And a lot of that money is used by municipalities to fund municipal services, policing often being the big one. And the provincial government actually dips its fingers into that pot too. They changed the rules, I think in 2021, to give themselves a bigger portion of the photo radar revenue. I think it's up to 40% now. So a bit of a fiscal problem to some extent is going to result from this, I think it's fair to say. Now, what's also interesting about this is by eliminating photo radar, the UCP's put themselves on a bit of a collision course with police forces across the province, which is, you know, usually conservative parties tend to be sort of law and order pro-police parties, and they're at loggerheads, I guess, with police over this, who say that this really does reduce traffic fatalities and traffic accidents, and this is a good, safe policy. So I guess we'll see what the outcome is for traffic around the province. Certainly, there's almost certainly going to be a reduction in revenue, both to municipalities and the province. But I guess we'll see what happens in terms of the safety aspect of it. Now, as you say, it is going to be in playground zones, school zones, and construction zones. And municipalities will be able to apply to the provincial government to allow photo radar on other installations. Perhaps it's a super high-risk intersection, an area where there's lots of speeding, collisions, and things like that. There may be some other locations that are approved, but those are going to be on a case-by-case basis.
As Canadians, we usually view our country as being much safer than our neighbors to the south. But a new study sheds some surprising light on that assumption. A recent report shows violent and property crimes in Canada have increased higher than in the U.S., and some rural crime rates tend to be higher than the urban ones. Up next, Jeanette Roche speaks with Dr. Livio Demeterio, an economics professor, a senior fellow at the Fraser Institute, who authored the study comparing recent crime trends in Canada and the U.S. Take a look.
Overall, crime is actually lower now than it was 20 or 30 years ago based on rates per 100,000 population. And it's also been declining in both countries, in both Canada and the United States. Where the difference is since 2014, there's actually been a rebound. So even though rates, today are lower than they were 20 or 30 years ago, compared to where we were, 7 or 8 years ago, the rates are higher. And it's pretty much across the board. Homicides, for example, in 2014 in Canada were about 1.5 homicides per 100,000 people. That's gone up to 2.3 by the end of the study period in this report. That's a 53% increase. In the United States, which has always had a higher homicide rate than Canada, it's gone from 3.9 to 5.8, which is a 49% increase. Then if you start to look at violent crime, historically, Canada has always had a lower violent crime rate than the United States. But again, since 2014, our violent crime has increased faster than the United States. So we've gone from 302 violent crimes per 100,000 in 2014 to 434. That's a 44% increase. The U.S. has also increased from 362 to 381 per 100,000, but that's only about 5%. So we have actually, as of 2022, surpassed the U.S. violent crime rate by about 14%. We're 14% higher, which is a remarkable development given that historically we've always had lower crime rates. Then when you come to property crime historically in Canada has been slightly higher than the U.S. However, since 2014, we've gone from about 2,328 crimes per 100,000 to 2,491. That's a 7% increase. However, in the United States, property crime rates have actually decreased over that same period, have gone from 2,574 to 1,954. So they've actually experienced a slight decrease, but our property crime rate is at present higher than that in the United States also.
That's crazy. And I would assume that the rates of violent crime and property crime are significantly higher in urban centers?
In terms of crime rate, some rural crime rates actually tend to be higher than urban ones, believe it or not. And there's also an east-west gradient in which crime rates in general in Canada tend to be lower the further east you go, and they tend to rise as you move further out west.
So why are violent crimes increasing that drastically here in Canada while the U.S. has only experienced a slight increase? What's driving that increase in Canada?
Well, that's a very good question, and the report doesn't actually look into the determinants of crime or what might be driving it. Historically, crime is related to demographics, for example. Younger populations tend to have higher crime rates, and so as populations have aged, it's probably not a surprise that crime rates have also declined over time. So the question is, what has happened to our demographics since, say, 2014, 2015? They have gotten slightly younger. There has been population growth, so that could be a factor. These are police-reported crime rates, and perhaps the police are simply catching more criminals and more crimes are being reported. That is also a possibility.
Well, we need to take a short break, but when we return, the holiday initiatives around Lethbridge ramp up their efforts as Christmas quickly approaches. This is the time of year when nonprofits are ramping up their holiday efforts, and one charity is in desperate need of some specific items. The Angel Tree campaign is down to its last 800 children to purchase and donate unwrapped gifts for. But Michelle Gallucci of Lethbridge Family Services says they're still needing toys for 12 to 24-month-olds and more girl items.
We're missing dolls. We have no dolls, 0 dolls. So if you want to give something, dolls is the thing. Baby dolls or older dolls for 6 to 9-year-olds and LOL dolls or Monster High dolls. We need dolls. So this year we are assisting 4,267 children more than last year. So the need is great. And it's because it is our economy affecting now the middle class. So now the middle class have found that the cost is higher for them. The donations are down a little bit. We are very lucky. Our donations dollar-wise are, we're coming into it, but we're still down 25,000. I expected a lot worse. The toys, however, are about half. So we're hoping that maybe we'll see a push towards the end. We've had to spend a lot of money on this campaign. And we do it because we're not leaving a child without toys. And every child gets the same amount of gift bundles, new toys, and new socks, toques, gloves.
If you plan to donate an unwrapped toy or monetary donation, you can drop it off in person at Lethbridge Family Services right through December the 20th. There are many Christmas initiatives taking place in Lethbridge, and the folks with Lethbridge Transit are pitching in to help some of them. In this next story, we get to know more about Lethbridge Transit's holiday bus and the charities it supports. It looks nothing like Santa's sleigh, but it's pretty darn close to what it will be doing. Lethbridge Transit is lighting up the season with a bus that is decked to the halls. Teaming up with community partners, the holiday bus will be parked outside a number of Christmas events throughout the season, inviting community members to drop off donations in support of the Christmas Hope campaign. Transit Operations Manager Joseph Bompiani says his department wanted to add some drive to Christmas initiatives and felt that a decorated bus that accepts donations for those who need it the most was the best way to spread Christmas cheer.
So we will be kind of not in service, but we will be obviously transporting it to and from events. We have 5 more that are lined up from now until December 23rd.
The Christmas Hope campaign is a collaboration comprised of 6 local agencies. They are the Interfaith Food Bank, Lethbridge Food Bank, Salvation Army's Toys for Tots, My City Care's Shop of Wonders, Volunteer Lethbridge, and Lethbridge Family Services Angel Tree. Executive Director for the Interfaith Food Bank, Daniel McIntyre, says the holiday bus is a welcomed addition to the Christmas Hope campaign, especially with increasing needs on her organization.
I mean, it certainly is a spectacle, so it is something that brings people's attention to the need in our community as well as the opportunity for them to do something about it. We've had a drastic increase over the last about year and a half, but this year has probably been our trickiest. We are a little concerned about how things may look for us in the new year if our Christmas campaigns don't go off well this year.
To catch the Lethbridge Transit holiday bus, you can view its schedule on the City of Lethbridge website. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day. And speaking of spreading joy, members of the Lethbridge Hurricanes are used to scoring goals, but this week they had a special goal in mind when visiting Chinook Regional Hospital. Following last weekend's teddy bear toss game, the hockey players gathered up the stuffies and distributed them to the children at the hospital. BCN's Landon Hickok was there and has the story.
On Monday, members of the Lethbridge Hurricanes arrived at the Chinook Regional Hospital to hand out teddy bears to children in the hospital's care that were thrown onto the ice on Friday's game against the Medicine Hat Tigers.
It's really nice to score this goal. I think a lot of people will be there and give some teddy bear to the kids. It's really nice too.
Exactly that. Seeing putting a smile on some kids' faces. It makes our day, makes them happy, makes us happy. I think it's just a great thing to do in general.
The Hurricanes' next game coming up will be at the VisitLethbridge.com arena on Wednesday night when they face the Saskatoon Blades. For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
After the break, Brenna Scott with the Lethbridge Blood Plasma Donor Center explains how plasma is processed to create medications to help those dealing with chronic health infections. And if you're watching us online, that full interview is available on our YouTube channel. We'll be right back.